It so happened that I'm writing a computer game right now. It's a 3D WebGL game, but it's a story for a different video, I think, if you're interested. But I was thinking about monetizing, game because I wanted to be somewhat commercial. And then I started thinking about tokenomics because I've heard a lot about it. I've interpreted on events dedicated to crypto and tokenomics. And so I started thinking about it, and then that led me to, thinking about the value of money, because essentially thinking about crypto and monetizing through crypto, you start thinking about how valuable the money that I want to use in that game. How valuable is it now? How valuable is it going to be? Are there any expectations and predictions? So all that stuff. And that led me to start thinking about value of money itself. And, because we used to have money that was worth in itself something, like an item. Like if we take a coin, this is not a gold coin, but essentially coins were made of gold as well as other metals, and the metal itself was considered precious regardless of what is written or drawn on the coin, because that's political, and that is a political arrangement whose picture is on the coin. But the metal itself is considered valuable anyway. So whether the political context is valuable or not, that's one story. But gold in itself, or precious metal in itself that the coin is made of, is considered valuable. So it has an intrinsic value. Even if you lose the political value or the monetary value of the nomination of this coin, you still have the intrinsic value of the gold, right? But in this statement, there's also a lot of unknowns. What is then so valuable about gold? What is this intrinsic value of gold, and why do we consider gold valuable in itself? Because with silver, you can pretty much explain some of its value. It has the most electric conductivity. It has, or not the most, but it's one of the most electrically conducive metals. And then it has some medical properties or antibacterial properties, because you can use silver to purify water to some degree. But with gold, I haven't found any description of what specifically makes gold so valuable. And we just assume it is. And so I started digging into some documents, and I stumbled, after reading lots of discussions, pretty futile discussions, because nobody knows what's valuable about gold. And I stumbled upon some interesting things in archival documents from nowhere else than early Soviet Union. So let me show you what I found. So here's some info that I found in archival documents. And it's part of the archives that were released by the Kremlin, by Moscow, after the dissolution of Soviet Union somewhere early 90s. And it's an archival document about this guy. And this guy, his name was Jacob Blumkin, and his expedition to Tibet. And it's just a scanned copy, which says what the expedition was about. It was to look for, esoteric stuff, to look for some maybe technology or knowledge, because they knew the early Soviet government were a completely different birds than the late Soviet government, where Soviet Union started to fall apart. They were pretty much they were very young, and they were into all kinds of mysticism, And so they traveled to Tibet and India and China. And so this guy, Jacob Blumkin, traveled in 1925 to Lhasa, Tibet. And then he met there Tibetan government. So, not to bore you with the just the text on the screen so much, because it's just documents. I'll put the link into a description, and you can see all these scanned documents yourselves. What I did is to entertain you a little bit. I used this information, some of the information, as a prompt for AI, and so I'll tell you a short version of what's in those documents. It's basically a minutes of interrogation of that Jacob Blumkin after he traveled to Tibet. So Tibetan government, they were like elders at the same time. And so first Jacob Blumkin wanted to show himself as a traveling monk. His cover was blown later, and he basically had to reveal his identity as a Soviet envoy, but he was hosted very well because he produced an official letter that he's an official representative of the Soviet Union. And so he was given a proper reception. He stayed there for quite a while, and he says that there was some sort of initiation procedure, after which he was shown some of the artifacts, some of the sacred places and facilities that are very ancient. And so they showed him some of the technologies that were left after the previous civilizations. And some of those look like this in AI's imagination, because it's something that the text mentions as some giant tongs, pressure tongs and temperature tongs. So it's a device. We don't know how it looked like, but it's just ideas that AI provided. But according to the text, they were much bigger than this one. There's something huge, which fits in the building barely. But anyway, it's just AI. And so these tongs, judging or according to the description of what Mr. Jacob Blumkin is saying in the archive, they were used to put some extreme pressure and extreme temperature on golden powder. So a powder of gold. And under that temperature and pressure, which is somewhere close to a temperature and pressure on the surface of sun, so it's pretty high, 6,000 to 7,000 Celsius. And it's a technology, according to what Blumkin says, according to what the Tibetans were telling him, dates back to 8 to 10,000 years BC, so before Christian calendar. So we're talking 11,000 years or 12,000 years ago. And so what happens when you apply these tongs to golden powder? Gold displays certain properties that make other materials lighter. So if you put that gold on a giant slab of rock, so later if you put that gold onto a heavy giant slab of rock, this gold, after the treatment with those pressure tongs, changes the properties of that rock for a while. The properties are changing, meaning that it loses most of its weight, it loses most of its mass while still being an object of this size. Again, we don't know if it's true. We cannot at the moment check whether it's possible or not. That if you put some gold like this, that's again some AI pictures I generated just to illustrate the point of what's described in that text. So if you put some gold, after treatment of this gold with the pressure tongs, other materials that this gold comes into contact with change their properties. So you can only imagine, if that were true. Of course, we know now what's the deal with pyramids and stuff. How they built these giant stone temples with huge slabs of rock, having no modern machinery and stuff. And so that's what the story says in this little archival document. Well, again, we don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting illustration of what a real value of gold could be, right? That it does have some properties that do solve some tasks, some problems. And that's what the intrinsic quality of gold is, if we take this account from these archival documents seriously. So he goes on to describe some other knowledge that those Tibetan guys and Dalai Lama were sharing with him. In particular, that those tools, different tools, there were some huge spherical devices and stuff. And all those tools, all that tech, as the Tibetans told him, were left from previous civilizations, and that there had been 5 of them before. And every civilization before, he says, perished because of one and the same cataclysm that repeated itself every 3,600 years. And that cataclysm had to do with another planet, which had an elliptical orbit. And it visited solar system somewhere very close to Earth, as it was then. And each time it passed close to Earth on that elliptical orbit, it caused great cataclysms. And because of those cataclysms, the civilizations that were before perished in calamities and incredible magnitude natural disasters. So they couldn't survive them. And some of them ended up in terrible wars. Also, some of those wars, as we can read in other ancient documents, like the Hindu documents, also were fought with some terrible weapons. I don't know if any of this is true, of course. I cannot claim whether we know for a fact that this happened, but there are many sources that pretty much sing the same song. So, but interestingly, coming back to the value of gold, interestingly, it describes that gold does have a certain value in itself, and we just don't know about it. And then coming back to current money that we're using, which don't use valuable materials anymore. They just use tokens. So basically, tokenomics is just a word that emerged recently, but we have been using tokenized money for decades and hundreds of years. Because any paper money, the so-called fiat money, is essentially a token. It's not something that is valuable in itself. So a piece of paper, which you consider money, may not help you if you're hungry and all you have is that piece of paper, because you can eat that piece of paper, but hardly it's going to be nutritious. Whereas, gold and silver, they did have some intrinsic value, and you could solve some problems with it. So, of course, you cannot eat it, but at least you can solve some interesting tasks with it. So that may help you. A piece of paper has much less useful application. So tokens are everywhere in terms of money, and in terms of that, crypto is nothing different from fiat money. It's just that it's electronic, and it's basically a pool of crypto is basically an array of numbers. It's a pool of numbers that you generate as a number of combinations of a certain amount of digits, like brute forcing a password. Basically, like you want to brute force a password, you just iterate through every combination that you can have with these digits, depending on how many you have of them. So it's just a mathematical problem to solve, and crypto is just completely arbitrary, and it's electronic. So that's another vulnerability, because you can have a gold coin or just precious coin or just coin, and it doesn't depend on electricity or internet. Whereas crypto is completely dependent on electricity and internet and the technical infrastructure to actually read that money or process that money, because without it, it's worthless. It doesn't even exist. Your crypto doesn't exist until you turn on a certain device which will, make it emerge and exist because it's powered. And that is something completely, I would say, unreliable, because what do you do if you have no internet? That means you have no money. Okay, if you have no maybe you store your Bitcoin or whatever crypto money you have on a flash drive or some kind of hardware wallet. So what? You still need a device to read that wallet. You still need electricity. And what if you don't have any? So all these were questions that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about tokenizing my game. Okay, I can show you a little piece of that game that I was mentioning in the beginning. It's a 3D puzzle adventure game about this little snail guy who is traveling in some locations, and I'm not going to reveal what's the gameplay about. If you want, I can make an extra video about it, but I'm thinking about monetizing it, and so that made me basically think about crypto and tokens and stuff like that. So maybe you have some ideas how to tokenize a game, it's not aggressive, it's not a violent game, it's not a game of conquest. It's a very peaceful but competitive game. So there are NPCs and stuff to avoid, but the mechanics is completely different, and it's not a game of conquest. So anyway, that's a different topic maybe, and I'll maybe show more of this if you're interested later in other videos. So for now, thanks for watching, and keep up the good spirit. And if you have some interesting comments regarding gold and the value, please share below, but please without using insults against each other. Thanks and cheers.